You don't need healing, you need this realization, Joel Goldsmith's most radical truth. We begin, as we always must begin, not with a problem, not with a desire, not with a need, but with a moment of quiet recognition. There is something to be heard before anything can be said, something to be known before anything can be done. And so we pause, not to wait for God to come, not to invite God into our experience, but to acknowledge that God already is. Be still and know that I am God. That is not a promise. It is a statement of fact. It does not say be still so that God may become present. It says be still and know what already is. This message is not given to help you change your life, improve your conditions, or correct something that appears to be wrong. Those are human objectives, and they belong to the realm of belief. What we are concerned with here is principle, divine principle, because when principle is understood, conditions take care of themselves. When truth is realized, appearances yield without effort. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Notice that the Master did not say seek healing or seek supply or seek harmony. He said seek the kingdom, seek the realization of God. Now let us be very clear at the outset. This is not a message about healing. It may sound strange to hear that said in a world that is so preoccupied with sickness, lack, fear, and discord. But healing is not the subject here. Healing is an effect. Healing is what happens when something else has already taken place in consciousness. And if we begin with healing, we have already begun too late. We have begun with the effect instead of the cause. We have begun with the appearance instead of the reality. What we are concerned with is realization. And realization is not something that takes place in time. It is not something that happens tomorrow, or after sufficient study, or after years of discipline. Realization is an awakening to what eternally is. Before Abraham was, I am. That statement does not refer to history, it refers to being. It points us away from time, away from process, away from becoming, and brings us face to face with is. And where that I am is realized, there is no room left for fear, no space left for disease, no law left to sustain limitation. Most of us have been trained religiously, metaphysically, and psychologically to believe that life is something to be managed. We believe that health must be achieved, supply must be demonstrated, peace must be earned. And even when we turn to God, we often do so with the same hidden assumption that something is lacking, something is broken, something must be fixed. But the scriptures never present God as a repairman. God is revealed as being itself. I am that I am, not I will be, not I shall become, but I am. And if God is I am, then where can lack enter? Where can disease find a foothold? Where can discord claim authority? Let us understand this clearly and gently. The moment we seek healing, we have already accepted the belief that healing is necessary. We have already accepted the testimony of the senses as real. We have already said, silently or aloud, there is something here that God must do something about. And yet the Master said, my Father worketh hitherto, and I work. Not will work, not may work, but worketh. Divine activity is not intermittent. It is not turned on by prayer, nor turned off by neglect. It is the eternal action of being. Therefore, as we sit here this morning, we are not asking for anything. We are not seeking an answer to a question nor a solution to a problem. We are simply opening ourselves to recognition. The kingdom of God is within you, not coming to you, not descending upon you, but within you. And if that is true, and it is, then what remains to be added? What remains to be healed? What remains to be supplied? This is why we must begin in stillness. Not stillness as a technique, not stillness as a discipline, but stillness as a natural surrender of the human mind's noise. The human mind is always trying to do something, fix something, improve something. But truth does not respond to effort. Grace is not earned. Revelation is not achieved through striving. Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. And spirit is known only when the clamor of human thought is quieted. In this stillness, we are not turning away from the world in order to escape it. We are turning away from appearances in order to see them rightly. We are not denying that problems seem to exist. We are denying that they have power, law, or reality. Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. That statement alone, if realized, dissolves the entire foundation upon which fear is built. So let us rest here for a moment, not mentally, but consciously. Let us acknowledge, without words, if possible, that God is present as our very being, that life is not something flowing into us, but something expressing as us. That truth is not something we learn, but something we awaken to. And in this recognition, we lay the groundwork not for healing, but for freedom, not for change, but for revelation. We are not here to make a demonstration. We are here to live by a principle. And when a principle is lived, demonstrations follow as naturally as light follows the rising of the sun. Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. The light does not struggle to shine. It simply is what it is. Remain, then, in this awareness. Let the mind be quiet. Let the heart be open. Let the sense of personal responsibility fall away. What is to be revealed will reveal itself, not because we ask, but because there is nothing left to resist it. Now, having established this atmosphere of stillness and recognition, we may look calmly without fear, without judgment, at the fundamental error that underlies nearly all human suffering. It is not disease, nor sin, nor lack, nor even fear itself. These are only effects. The error lies deeper than that. The error is the belief that something has gone wrong in God's creation, that life has fallen into disorder, and that man stands separate from his source, needing repair, correction, or rescue. From childhood, we are taught by religion, by medicine, by society that health is fragile, that supply is uncertain, that peace is temporary. And when these beliefs assert themselves as bodily discord or troubled circumstances, we accept them almost automatically as facts. Even when we turn to prayer or spiritual study, we often do so without questioning the premise. We assume that healing is necessary because we assume that something real is wrong. But this assumption itself is the root of the trouble. The scriptures never teach that man fell out of God. They teach that man believed he did. Adam, where art thou? God did not ask that question because Adam was lost, but because Adam believed himself to be lost. And Adam answered, I was afraid. Fear entered first, not punishment, not disease, not death. Fear was the beginning of the dream, and fear is sustained only by belief. Perfect love casteth out fear. Not perfect health, not perfect conditions, but perfect love, the realization of God's allness and nearness. Let us see this clearly. Healing is always sought because we believe in a power opposed to God. If there were no belief in a power apart from God, what would there be to heal? If God is infinite life, where could death enter? If God is omnipresent being, where could absence arise? If God is divine law, where could a law of disease, accident, or limitation operate? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, one, not two, one not competing with something else, and yet much of our spiritual effort is unconsciously based on the belief in two powers. We say God is good, but we also believe disease is powerful. We say God is love, but we also fear evil. We say God is omnipresent, but we act as though he sometimes arrives too late. This divided consciousness is not healed by more effort, more affirmations, or more treatments. It is healed only by understanding, by the quiet recognition that there never were two powers to begin with. The Master never treated disease as an entity. He never analyzed it, feared it, or attempted to destroy it. He simply did not accept its claim to reality. Why callest thou me good? There is none good but one, that is, God. That was not a denial of goodness. It was a refusal to locate power in appearances. When blindness, leprosy, or death confronted him, he did not see conditions, he saw false testimony. And false testimony does not need to be healed, it needs to be disbelieved. Here is where many earnest students falter. They believe that acknowledging a problem is humility, that accepting a diagnosis is honesty, that agreeing with appearances is realism. But spiritual truth is not concerned with human realism, it is concerned with divine reality. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Righteous judgment is not condemnation, it is discernment. It is the ability to see through the appearance to the reality that underlies it. The moment we accept disease as real, we begin to ask how to get rid of it. The moment we accept lack as real, we begin to ask how to overcome it. The moment we accept sin as personal, we begin to struggle with guilt and reform. But all of these struggles are unnecessary because they are based on a false premise. They assume that something exists which God did not create, sustains, or govern. And that assumption, if followed to its conclusion, would mean that God is not infinite after all. Let us be very gentle here, because this is not a rebuke, it is a liberation. You are not wrong for wanting healing. You are not weak for seeking help, but you are mistaken if you believe that healing is the goal. Healing is only the byproduct of awakening. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Notice that it does not say the truth shall heal you. Freedom is deeper than healing. Freedom means that the thing which once demanded healing no longer has authority in your consciousness. This is why so many healings are temporary. Relief is obtained, symptoms disappear, conditions improve, but the underlying belief remains untouched. And when the belief remains, it finds another avenue of expression. That is not failure, it is education. It is life gently insisting that we look deeper, that we stop trying to fix effects and begin to question causes, not physical causes, not mental causes, but the primary cause, belief in separation from God. The belief that you need healing is itself the belief that you are separate from wholeness, and that belief cannot be healed, it must be surrendered. Except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Conversion here does not mean adopting a new belief system. It means turning away from false assumptions and returning to simplicity, to the recognition that life is God and God is present. When this is seen, even faintly, something shifts. The urgency to fix disappears. The fear begins to loosen its grip. The mind grows quieter, not because it is disciplined, but because it has nothing left to defend. And in that quietness, the Christ, the true selfhood, begins to be felt, not as a doctrine, but as a living presence. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of God. So let us not rush past this point. Let us stay with it. The belief that you need healing is not your enemy, it is your teacher. It is pointing you toward a deeper question. What must be realized so that healing is no longer necessary? And that question does not ask for effort, it asks for surrender. It asks us to lay down the belief in two powers and to stand, however quietly, in the awareness of one. Now we come to a point that must be met honestly, gently, and without defensiveness, because here lies one of the most subtle obstacles on the spiritual path. It is not the reliance on medicine alone, nor the reliance on material means, but the reliance on persons, even spiritual persons. The belief that another individual can do for us what must awaken within us is a belief that delays realization, however sincere it may be. Throughout the scriptures we find this lesson repeated again and again, though rarely understood. When the multitudes followed the Master because they had been fed, he did not rejoice in their gratitude. He rebuked them not harshly, but firmly. Ye seek me, not because ye saw the miracles, but because ye did eat of the loaves and were filled. In other words, you have mistaken the sign for the substance. You have mistaken the effect for the cause. I fed you, yes, but more than that. I showed you a principle by which supply is revealed. And because you did not grasp the principle, you return seeking the person. This is not confined to those early days. It is the same temptation that confronts every student today. When relief comes through the consciousness of a practitioner or teacher, there is a natural gratitude. But if that gratitude turns into dependence, something has gone astray. For then the student believes that the power resided in the person rather than in the principle which that person had learned, however momentarily, to yield to. And principle cannot be transferred. It must be realized. The Master understood this perfectly when he said, "It is expedient for you that I go away." How strange that must have sounded to those who had witnessed his works. Why would the one who healed, fed, and raised the dead speak of leaving as a benefit? Because as long as they depended on the man Jesus, the Christ could not awaken within them. As long as they looked outward for power, they could not discover that the kingdom of God was within. This is a law, not a criticism. No one can live your life for you. No one can realize truth for you. No one can awaken in your consciousness what you are unwilling to see. Even the greatest teacher can do no more than lift you momentarily into an awareness that must become your own if it is to abide. Call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father, which is in heaven. That statement does not deny human relationships, it denies spiritual dependency. Let us be very clear. There are those whose consciousness is sufficiently lifted that in their presence harmony is felt. Pain may lessen, fear may dissolve, clarity may come. This is not illusion, it is law. Consciousness communicates itself. Light dispels darkness simply by being present. But if the one who receives this uplift believes that it is the other who possesses something special, the lesson is lost. The demonstration remains external, temporary, and dependent. This is why so many healings, though genuine, do not endure. They are not wrong. They are incomplete. They prove that a principle exists, but they do not establish that principle in the individual's own consciousness. And until that happens, life will continue to demand the lesson again and again, not as punishment, but as insistence. Life insists that we awaken to what we already are. The infinite way has never been concerned with creating followers, students, or dependents. Its entire purpose is to free you from persons, from methods, from systems, and even from teachings. The teaching exists only to point beyond itself. He must increase, but I must decrease. That is not humility, it is law. The personal sense must diminish, so that principle may be revealed as the only power. Here is where we must examine ourselves quietly. When we seek help, what are we really seeking? Are we seeking relief, or are we seeking realization? Are we seeking someone to do something for us, or are we willing to be led to the place where nothing needs to be done? As long as we believe that another's prayer, another's treatment, another's understanding is the source of our good, we remain outside the kingdom, looking in. The Christ does not operate through favoritism. It does not single out one individual for blessing and another for neglect. God is no respecter of persons. Principle operates impartially, universally, eternally, and when it appears to operate through one more than another, it is only because one has yielded more fully to it at that moment. Tomorrow the roles may reverse. The teacher may become the student may become the teacher. For there is no hierarchy in spirit, only states of awareness. Do not misunderstand this point. It is not wrong to receive help. It is not wrong to sit at the feet of one who sees more clearly. But it is wrong because it is limiting to stop there. The purpose of every spiritual encounter is not dependence, but emancipation, not admiration, but awakening, not following, but realizing. The works that I do shall ye do also, and greater works than these shall ye do. That statement alone dissolves the myth of spiritual exclusivity. When you understand this, you no longer seek someone to heal you. You seek understanding. You seek awareness. You seek that inner shift where the belief in two powers dissolves and the Christ stands revealed as your very self. And when that happens, you will find that the need for healers falls away, not because healing is denied, but because wholeness is known. So let us bless every teacher, every practitioner, every instrument through which light has come to us. But let us not stop there. Let us accept every demonstration, not as an end, but as a signpost. It is pointing us inward. It is saying quietly and persistently, this, too, is possible for you, not through me, but through the principle I serve. And when that principle is lived, not merely admired, the outer need diminishes naturally, for then you are no longer living by a person, but by truth. And truth, once realized, never leaves you nor forsakes you. Now we must come to a point that, once understood, changes the entire direction of spiritual living. Healing, as it is commonly understood, is not what we have supposed it to be. It is not the changing of a sick body into a well body, nor the improvement of a troubled circumstance into a harmonious one. These are only appearances, and appearances are not the subject of spiritual work. Healing, in its true sense, is a change in consciousness, a yielding of a false sense of life to the realization of what life actually is. This is why true healing is so rare, even among sincere students. It is not rare because God withholds it. It is not rare because individuals are unworthy or unprepared. It is rare because most are seeking effects while leaving consciousness untouched. They want the result without the realization. But spirit does not work backward. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the spirit is spirit. Healing belongs to spirit, and spirit is known only through awakening, not effort. Let us see this clearly. Nothing is ever healed. That statement may sound startling, but it is fundamental. There is nothing in God's creation that requires repair. There is nothing in divine life that can become diseased. What appears as healing is the disappearance of a false belief from consciousness. It is the moment when the light of truth reveals that what we feared, fought, or endured had no law, no cause, no continuity. The light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Darkness does not flee because it is attacked. It vanishes because it is not something. When the Master healed, he did not work on bodies, minds, or conditions. He worked from realization. He beheld what others could not yet see. Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. That statement did not excuse disease. It denied its premise. It lifted the entire situation out of the realm of blame, cause, and effect, and placed it in the realm of revelation. Where revelation occurs, healing is inevitable. But revelation cannot be forced. It does not respond to willpower, repetition, or mental discipline. Many have tried to repeat truths, memorize passages, and hold correct thoughts, only to find that nothing changed. And they ask, why did it not work? It did not work because truth is not a tool. Truth is not something we use to produce an effect. Truth is something we yield to until it reveals itself. Not my will, but thine be done. That is not resignation, it is alignment. This is why so much metaphysical effort exhausts rather than frees. The individual is trying to make truth do something instead of letting truth be what it is. And truth will never serve the human mind. It dissolves the human mind's assumptions. Healing comes when we stop trying to heal and begin to see that life is whole, see that being is complete, see that God has never delegated power to disease, fear, heredity, accident, or time. Here we must be willing to surrender a cherished belief, the belief that we are separate beings who must be improved, corrected, or fixed. The human sense of self believes it has problems because it believes it exists apart from God. But the Christ self knows no such separation. I and my Father are one. That is not a goal to be attained. It is a fact to be realized. And when it is realized, even partially, the sense of discord begins to dissolve of its own accord. True healing, then, is not dramatic. It may appear sudden or gradual, but in either case it is quiet. It is the natural result of right seeing. It often comes when the struggle stops, when the fear subsides, when the mind no longer insists on outcomes. Many have experienced relief at the very moment they gave up trying to be healed. That is not coincidence. It is law. Resistance sustains appearances. Yielding dissolves them. This also explains why some who are healed later experience other difficulties. It is not punishment nor failure. It is simply that the belief which produced one appearance was not fully dissolved. It changed its form. Life, in its mercy, continues to present opportunities until realization is complete. Whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth. Chastening here does not mean suffering inflicted by God. It means instruction through experience. Do not be discouraged by this. Be grateful. Every appearance of discord is an invitation to deeper seeing, not to fight harder, but to rest more deeply in truth, not to declare more words, but to listen more quietly. Healing is not something to be pursued. It is something that follows understanding as naturally as the shadow follows the body. When this is understood, the frantic search for methods ends. The pressure to demonstrate disappears. Life becomes simpler, quieter, and more inwardly secure. You are no longer trying to make something happen. You are allowing something to be revealed. And what is revealed is not health, not wealth, not success, but God. And where God is realized, all that is unlike God fades into its native nothingness. So let us release the belief that healing is our task. It is not our task, if it can be called that, is to abide. Abide in me, and I in you. Abide in the awareness of God's presence. Abide in the recognition of oneness. Abide until the false sense yields. And when it does, healing will have already taken place, not because it was sought, but because it was no longer needed. Now we come to the heart of this message, not as a climax, but as a point of rest. There is one realization, simple, uncompromising, and final, that renders healing unnecessary. It is not dramatic, and it does not appeal to the human sense of achievement. Yet once it is glimpsed, even faintly, life is never again approached in the same way. That realization is this: there is only one power, one presence, one life. Not two, not God and something else, not spirit and matter, not health and disease struggling for mastery. I am the Lord, and there is none else. There is no God beside me. This is not theology. It is not belief. It is revelation. And revelation, once accepted, dissolves the very ground upon which fear, disease, and limitation stand. As long as we believe that there are two powers in this universe, one good and one evil, one constructive and one destructive, we will continue to seek protection, healing, and defense. We will pray to God to overcome something, remove something, fix something. But in doing so, we unconsciously deny God's infinitude. We place God in competition with conditions, laws, and forces that he did not create and does not sustain. And that divided consciousness is the source of all struggle. The Master never prayed to overcome evil. He never asked God to destroy disease or conquer death. He rested in the realization of oneness, and from that realization the appearances dissolved. Resist not evil. Why? Because resistance gives evil status, power, and reality, and there is nothing to resist when God is all. If God be for us, who can be against us? Not because God fights on our side, but because there is no opposing side. When this realization dawns, healing becomes unnecessary, not because conditions do not appear, but because they are no longer interpreted as threats. They are seen for what they are: claims without law, shadows without substance, beliefs without authority. And what is a belief when it is no longer believed? It has no avenue through which to operate. It simply fades, unnoticed, unfeared, unopposed. This is the point at which spiritual living becomes effortless. You are no longer watching your thoughts anxiously, no longer guarding yourself against fear, no longer trying to maintain a high spiritual altitude. You are simply resting in what is. Underneath are the everlasting arms, and everlasting arms do not occasionally support, they always are. Let us understand this carefully. To say there is one power does not mean that human experience immediately becomes free of all discord. It means that when discord appears, it is no longer interpreted as reality. It no longer has the power to alarm, depress, or dominate consciousness. And without that acceptance, it cannot continue. According to your faith, be it unto you. Faith here is not belief in healing, it is belief in God's allness. This realization also ends the fear of the future. If there is one power now, there will be one power tomorrow. If God is life now, God will be life when the body changes, when circumstances shift, when human sense reaches its limits. I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. That promise is not conditional upon health, success, or longevity. It is rooted in being, and being does not come and go. Those who have touched this realization, even momentarily, lose their fear of disease, loss, and death, not because they are brave, but because fear requires belief in something that can oppose life. And when life is known as infinite, fear has no object. The early martyrs did not face persecution with courage. They faced it with understanding. They had already passed beyond the belief in death. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? This is not something to be forced upon oneself. It cannot be adopted as a mental position. It arises naturally when the false sense of separation yields. And that yielding does not happen through effort, but through quiet, repeated recognition of truth. Each time an appearance presents itself and we refuse to grant it power, another thread of belief dissolves. Gradually, the fabric of fear unravels, and what remains is peace. Here, then, is the freedom. You do not have to get rid of disease, sin, lack, or limitation. You do not have to conquer them, understand them, or analyze them. You have only to realize God. And when God is realized, there is nothing left for these appearances to attach themselves to. They are without foundation. Other foundation can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jesus Christ, the realization of divine oneness. So let us stop asking, how can I be healed? And begin to rest in a deeper question. What must I know of God that makes healing unnecessary? That question does not strain the mind, it stills it. And in that stillness, the answer is not heard, it is felt. It comes as peace, as assurance, as a quiet certainty that all is well, because all is God. And where that certainty abides, healing is no longer sought. It has already been outgrown. Now we must look directly at the point where most spiritual students stumble, not because they are unwilling, but because they are still judging by appearances. The senses present a picture, and the human mind, trained from infancy to trust that picture, accepts it as reality. Yet Scripture repeatedly warns us against this very habit. We look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. That statement alone overturns the entire basis of human judgment. What, then, is an appearance? An appearance is not a thing. It is not a power. It is not a law. It is a picture formed in consciousness by belief. And belief, no matter how universal, does not become truth by repetition. A mirage does not become water because many see it. It remains what it is, a false sense of something that never existed. So it is with disease, lack, sin, and death. They appear convincing only so long as they are believed. The difficulty is not that appearances are strong, but that we react to them. Reaction is consent. Reaction is agreement. Reaction is the moment when consciousness says, "This has authority over me." And from that moment, the appearance is sustained. The Master revealed this law when he said, "Why reason ye in your hearts?" He did not condemn the disciples for fear. He exposed its mechanism. Fear begins as reaction. Faith begins as non-reaction, not indifference, but understanding. When a condition presents itself, whether in the body, in a relationship, or in the world at large, the human impulse is to label it, analyze it, and oppose it. But spiritual consciousness does none of these things. It simply recognizes this is an appearance, not a reality. And because it does not grant reality, it does not grant power. Judge not after the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Righteous judgment is the discernment that knows what is God and what is not God and refuses to confuse the two. This is why conditions have no authority of their own. Authority belongs to law, and law belongs to God. If a condition were law, it would be universal, permanent, and unchangeable. Disease is not, fear is not, lack is not. They come and go. They contradict one another. They reverse themselves, and anything that reverses itself cannot be law. God is not the author of confusion. Therefore, confusion has no author, no source, no continuity. Consider how quickly appearances change when belief changes. A diagnosis is given and the body reacts. A new diagnosis is given and the reaction shifts. The condition did not change because of truth. It changed because belief changed. This alone should alert us to the nature of appearances. They are not governed by divine law. They are governed by acceptance. And what is accepted can be unaccepted. What is believed can be unbelieved. Yet we are not asked to fight belief. We are asked to outgrow it. Belief dissolves naturally in the presence of understanding, just as darkness dissolves in the presence of light. There is no struggle. There is no effort. There is simply clearer seeing. And clearer seeing reveals that what once terrified us was never armed with power. The prince of this world cometh, and hath nothing in me. Nothing, not a little something, not a temporary something, but nothing. This is why the spiritual path is one of awakening, not overcoming. We are not here to overcome disease, fear, or death. We are here to awaken from the belief that they are something. And awakening is not violent, it is gentle. It does not shock consciousness, it illumines it. One moment we believe the dream, and the next moment we see through it. And in that seeing, the dream loses its hold. Let us apply this very simply. When pain presents itself, what is it claiming? It is claiming presence, power, and cause. But it cannot name its cause in God, because God is life. It cannot name its law, because God's law sustains harmony. It cannot name its continuity, because God's being is eternal and changeless. Therefore, pain has no credentials. It is an intruder, not an inhabitant. And intruders do not need to be expelled when the door is closed to them. This same principle applies to every form of discord. Economic conditions, world events, personal conflicts, all of these appear formidable only when we accept that they operate under law. But the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. There is no area of life outside divine government. And where divine government is recognized, appearances lose their authority. Now, this does not mean that we ignore the human scene or deny its claims verbally. Denial is often only another form of resistance. What is required is a quiet inward recognition. This is not what it appears to be, and that recognition must be impersonal. The moment we personalize appearances, my disease, my problem, my fear, we bind them to ourselves. Impersonalization frees both us and them. This is why Christ consciousness sees no sick man, no sinful man, no dying man. It sees only false testimony about man, and testimony can be withdrawn. Let God be true, but every man a liar. That does not accuse humanity. It exposes sense testimony as unreliable. And when sense testimony is no longer trusted, it loses its influence. So we come gradually and naturally to a new way of living. We stop asking what something looks like and begin asking what it is. We stop reacting and begin recognizing. We stop defending ourselves against appearances and rest in the authority of truth. And in that resting, something remarkable happens. Appearances change without being fought. This is not miracle. It is law. It is the law of spirit which operates whether we understand it or not, but blesses us consciously when we do. And the more we practice this discernment between appearance and reality, the less authority appearances have in our experience. Eventually, they come and go like passing clouds, leaving the sky of consciousness undisturbed. And this is freedom, not freedom from appearances, but freedom in the midst of them. Freedom that does not depend on circumstances, conditions, or outcomes. Freedom that rests in the unchanging nature of God. Now we come to a place in consciousness that marks a turning point on the spiritual path. It is not dramatic, and it is not outwardly visible. But when it is reached, something fundamental changes. This is the place where judgment ends. And where judgment ends, grace begins to function without obstruction. Judgment, as we are speaking of it here, is not merely criticism or condemnation. It is far more subtle than that. Judgment is the act of naming appearances as real, good or bad, healthy or sick, spiritual or unspiritual. The moment we judge, even favorably, we have stepped out of the kingdom of God and into the realm of duality. For God does not judge his creation. He knows it. Judge not, that ye be not judged. That is not a moral warning, it is a spiritual law. As long as we judge, we divide. We divide people into worthy and unworthy conditions, into acceptable and unacceptable experiences, into blessings and problems. But Spirit knows no such divisions. I am the Lord, I change not. And that which does not change does not oscillate between good and evil. It simply is. Judgment belongs to the human sense because the human sense lives in comparison. Grace belongs to God because God lives in completeness. When healing is sought, judgment is usually present, even if unconsciously. We judge a condition as wrong, undesirable, or dangerous. We judge ourselves or others as victims of it, and then we ask God to correct what we have judged. But God does not correct his own creation. God reveals it, and revelation is blocked wherever judgment is active. This is why the Master asked, "Who made me a judge or a divider over you?" He refused the role of arbiter between human claims. He did not take sides. He did not align himself with one condition against another. He stood above the entire field of appearances and beheld only reality. That is Christ consciousness. And Christ consciousness heals precisely because it does not judge. Let us understand this carefully. Judgment is not overcome by trying to be more loving or tolerant. That is still effort. Judgment ends when we see that appearances are not persons, not powers, not realities. When we realize that sin, disease, and lack are not identities but false claims, there is no one left to judge and nothing left to condemn. Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. The condemnation was removed before the instruction was given. Grace preceded correction. This is the great release. When judgment ends, we stop trying to fix people, reform situations, or correct conditions. We no longer hold others in mental images, whether of sickness, ignorance, or even holiness. We see through the appearance to the reality that animates, and we leave the appearance alone, and in leaving it alone, we deprive it of the attention and resistance that sustain it. You may recall the Master's words, "Why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye?" He was not speaking of moral hypocrisy. He was speaking of perception. The beam is the belief that appearances are real. Remove that belief, and the mote disappears of its own accord, not because it was fixed, but because it was never there. This is where grace enters. Grace is not God deciding to be kind. Grace is the natural operation of truth when the obstacles to its flow are removed. Judgment is one of those obstacles. Fear is another. Effort is another. When these fall away, grace acts without interference. My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Weakness here means the surrender of personal judgment, personal will, and personal sense. In this state of consciousness, healing no longer occupies the foreground. It recedes into the background, almost unnoticed. The individual is no longer watching the body, scanning conditions, or measuring progress. Attention has shifted from effects to being, and being, once recognized, governs without strain. The government shall be upon his shoulder, not upon yours. This is also the end of condemnation of oneself and of others. We stop blaming ourselves for conditions, and we stop blaming others for their experiences. Blame presupposes personal causation. Grace reveals impersonal law. What appears as discord is seen as a universal belief, not a personal fault. And when it is impersonalized, it loses its sting, its shame, and its power. Here we begin to live in a new way. We meet life without resistance. We listen instead of reacting. We see instead of judging. We allow instead of forcing. And this allowance is not passivity, it is alignment. It is the alignment of human consciousness with divine reality. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Grace never breaks in, it waits to be recognized. When this state is attained, even partially, a remarkable peace settles in consciousness, not because problems have vanished, but because they no longer define reality. They are no longer personal. They are no longer feared. They come and they go. And consciousness remains undisturbed, rooted in something deeper than circumstance. That is grace. So we are not striving to be better healers. We are not striving to be more spiritual. We are yielding judgment. And in that yielding, we discover that what we sought through effort has always been present through grace. Healing ceases to be an objective. It becomes incidental. It happens while we are not looking at it. This, then, is the secret. When judgment ends, God begins to function unobstructed in consciousness. And where God functions, there is harmony, not achieved, but revealed. Now we arrive at a point that, for many, overturns long-held religious habits. It is the discovery that silence is more powerful than prayer, not because prayer is wrong, but because most prayer is still effort, still desire, still asking God to do something that God has already done. Silence, in its true spiritual sense, is not emptiness. It is fullness recognized. It is the cessation of the human mind's interference with divine action. The world has been taught to pray for centuries, yet the Master withdrew into silence. When thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret. That closet is not a physical place, it is a state of consciousness. It is the place where words cease, where desires fall away, where the human sense of self no longer speaks. And it is there, not in words, not in petitions, that prayer is answered before it is uttered. Most prayer begins with a problem. Something is wrong. Something is feared. Something is lacking. And prayer becomes an attempt to persuade God to correct it. But God does not respond to persuasion. God is not moved by urgency or repetition. Your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask him. If that is true, and it is, then what purpose do words serve? They serve only to quiet the mind until it can hear what is already being given. This is why silence is the highest form of prayer. Silence does not ask, it listens. Silence does not outline, it yields. Silence does not seek to change God's will. It aligns consciousness with what eternally is, and in that alignment, the sense of separation dissolves. Be still and know that I am God. That is not instruction for the body. It is instruction for consciousness. Stop thinking about God and know God. The human mind believes that activity produces results. It believes that if it says the right words, holds the right thoughts, or maintains the right attitude, something will happen. But spiritual realization does not come through activity. It comes through surrender. It comes when the human sense reaches the end of its own resources and quietly steps aside, not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. This does not mean that truth statements are wrong. They have their place. They serve as a wedge to open consciousness. They turn thought away from appearances and toward reality. But if we remain in words, we remain in thought, and thought, however refined, is still not realization. Realization occurs when thought stops, when there is no longer someone thinking about God, but only awareness of God. Many have experienced this without understanding it. They have struggled with prayer, sought healing, repeated truths, and then, exhausted, have let go. And in that letting go, peace has come. Relief has come. Sometimes healing has come. They say, it happened when I stopped trying. Yes, because silence took over where effort failed. Silence allowed God to be God. The Master demonstrated this repeatedly. Before great moments of revelation or demonstration, he withdrew. He did not consult, plan, or outline. He waited. He listened. And when he spoke, his words carried authority, not because of volume or emotion, but because they arose out of silence. The words that I speak unto you, I speak not of myself, but the Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. This is the secret of spiritual power. It is not generated, it is received. It does not flow through effort, it flows through receptivity. Silence is receptivity. Silence is the open door. Silence is the state in which the false sense of self is not active and therefore cannot obstruct the flow of grace. Let us be very clear. Silence is not something you do. You cannot practice silence in the same way you practice a technique. Silence comes when the need to do something ends. It comes when consciousness is satisfied with God alone. My soul, wait thou only upon God, for my expectation is from him. Expectation here does not mean anticipation of an outcome. It means trust in being. In silence, we are no longer concerned with whether healing takes place, whether conditions change, whether tomorrow improves. We are present, and presence is power. Not personal power, but divine presence. And where divine presence is realized, the false sense that produced discord cannot remain. It has no atmosphere in which to operate. This is why silence heals without effort. It does not attack disease, fear, or lack. It simply withdraws belief from them. And what is not believed cannot function. Silence is not passive. It is sovereign. It does not resist. It reigns. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. That is not poetry, it is law. As we learn to value silence, not as an escape, but as a recognition, we find that prayer becomes less frequent and more profound. Words fall away naturally. Requests dissolve. What remains is communion, and communion is not conversation, it is oneness realized. That they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me and I in thee. When this becomes the basis of our spiritual life, healing ceases to be an objective. It becomes an incidental effect of right consciousness. We are no longer praying for something, we are resting in something. and that something is God. So let us not be concerned with how well we pray. Let us be concerned with how deeply we can be still. In that stillness, everything that needs to be known will be known. Everything that needs to dissolve will dissolve. And everything that truly is will stand revealed. When this understanding has taken root, when silence has replaced effort and grace has displaced judgment, life begins to take on a different character. Not outwardly at first, but inwardly, where all real change occurs. One does not wake up one morning and declare, "I no longer need healing." Rather, the need quietly fades, as a child outgrows a toy without deciding to do so. Attention has shifted. Consciousness has matured. Living without the need for healing does not mean that appearances never present themselves. It means that appearances no longer define experience. They may arise, but they do not alarm. They may announce themselves, but they are not obeyed. Though an host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Fear is what gives appearances their seeming authority. When fear is absent, appearances lose their voice. This is the point at which spiritual understanding becomes practical, not because we are applying it, but because we are embodying it. We no longer rush inward every time a symptom appears, nor outward every time a condition changes. We remain where we are, rooted in being. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. To dwell is not to visit. It is not an occasional retreat into prayer. It is a way of living. Here, problems no longer feel personal. They are not my disease, my fear, my lack. They are recognized as impersonal suggestions arising from the collective belief in separation. And because they are impersonal, they do not require personal struggle. They are met with understanding, not resistance. Understanding is sufficient. The truth shall make you free. Not the effort to live the truth, but the recognition of it. Life, then, becomes quieter, not less active, but less strained. Decisions are made without anxiety. Situations are met without anticipation of disaster. The future loses its threat because life is no longer projected into tomorrow. It is lived now. Take therefore no thought for the morrow, not because tomorrow will be perfect, but because tomorrow is not where life is. Life is now, and life is God. In this state of consciousness, one may notice that healings occur without attention being given to them. Harmony appears, needs are met, relationships adjust, but these are no longer celebrated as demonstrations. They are accepted as natural. One does not marvel that light dispels darkness. One simply lives in the light. So it is here. Healing is no longer a special event. It is the normal outcome of right seeing. This does not lead to indifference or neglect. On the contrary, it leads to deeper compassion, but a compassion free of fear and pity. We no longer rush to save, fix, or advise. We listen. We see. We hold others, not in thought, not in prayer, but in recognition. Recognition is the highest form of service. It does not impose truth. It beholds it. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Service here is not action, it is consciousness. Living this way also brings a great humility, not the humility of self-deprecation, but the humility that knows I can of mine own self do nothing. And because we know this, We stop trying to do something. We stop taking personal responsibility for outcomes that were never personal to begin with. Responsibility shifts back to God, where it has always belonged. And in that shift, we begin to understand why the Master could sleep in the storm. He was not demonstrating courage. He was resting in reality. The storm was an appearance. God was the fact. And facts do not panic. When this same understanding begins to function in us, storms still arise, but they no longer govern consciousness. They pass. We remain. This is not something that happens all at once. It unfolds gently, naturally, as trust deepens and effort diminishes. Each time we refuse to react, each time we choose recognition over resistance, each time we rest instead of struggle, we take another step out of the belief in two powers, and gradually, without fanfare, the need for healing dissolves, not because life has become perfect, but because consciousness has become stable. We are then living by principle, not by circumstance, by truth, not by report, by being, not by becoming. And this is the life of freedom, not freedom from appearances, but freedom from their domination. Freedom that does not depend on what happens, but on what is known. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Trust here is not hope, it is rest. And rest is the sign that healing is no longer the goal, because God has become the ground of being. Now we come to the point where even the desire to progress must be surrendered, not because progress is wrong, but because the belief that something remains to be done belongs to the same sense that once believed something needed to be healed. And when this belief falls away, there is a great simplicity, a great relief, a great stillness that cannot be described, only lived. The final surrender is not dramatic. It does not come with emotion, nor with declaration. It comes quietly, often unnoticed, when the soul realizes that it has been seeking what has never been absent. Lord, Thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Not shall be, not may be, but hast been. And if God has always been our dwelling place, where have we been wandering? Only in thought. At this point, the impulse to improve oneself spiritually subsides. One is no longer trying to become more loving, more faithful, more awakened. These efforts belong to the belief that we are incomplete. But completeness does not improve, it reveals itself. Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. That was not a command to strive, it was a statement of identity. When this is realized, something extraordinary happens. Effort ceases without being resisted. The mind no longer searches for methods, techniques, or teachings. Even truth itself is no longer clung to. One rests in being. I have learned, in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. Contentment here does not mean satisfaction with conditions. It means satisfaction with God. This is the place where spiritual work ends, not because life ends, but because struggle ends. One no longer watches the body anxiously, no longer scans circumstances for signs, no longer interprets events as tests or lessons. Life flows, consciousness abides, and whatever appears is met with the same quiet assurance: God is here. Here we understand why the Master said, "It is finished." Not because his work was over, but because the sense of separation had been completely dissolved. There was nothing left to surrender, nothing left to give up, nothing left to overcome, only God and God alone. This is why nothing needs to be done. Doing belongs to the realm of lack. Being belongs to the realm of fulfillment. And when being is recognized, doing takes care of itself. Actions arise naturally, guided not by fear or desire, but by inner direction. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, ordered, not planned, not forced, not worried into place. In this final surrender, even prayer falls silent. Not because prayer is rejected, but because prayer has fulfilled its purpose. Communion has replaced petition, awareness has replaced asking. In that day ye shall ask me nothing. That day is not in the future. It is the moment when God is known as present. There is great freedom here. Freedom from self-improvement, freedom from spiritual ambition, freedom from fear of failure or fear of loss. Nothing can be lost, because nothing was ever gained. Nothing can be taken away, because nothing was ever added. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Want ends where God is realized. This surrender does not make one passive. It makes one available. Available to life, to love, to service, but without strain. One gives without depletion, loves without attachment, serves without sacrifice, because the source is no longer personal. The source is infinite. Freely ye have received, freely give. And so we arrive not at an ending, but at a resting place. A place where the soul no longer asks, "What must I do?" but quietly knows what is sufficient. A place where healing has no meaning because wholeness is the ground of being. A place where the journey has ended because it was never necessary. Return unto thy rest, O my soul, for the Lord hath dealt bountifully with thee. Not will deal, but hath dealt. It is done. It has always been done. And now we come to the place where words themselves must begin to withdraw. Not because there is nothing more to say, but because what remains cannot be said. It can only be recognized. All that has been unfolded here has not been given to add something to you, nor to take something away from you, but simply to uncover what has always been present. What man is he that liveth, and shall not see death? Only the one who has already passed beyond the belief that life is in the body. So we do not conclude with instruction, nor with summary, nor with exhortation. We conclude where we began, in stillness, not the stillness of effort, but the stillness of rest. The stillness that comes when the mind has stopped reaching, stopped questioning, stopped evaluating. The stillness that is not created, but entered. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Salvation here is not rescue, it is revelation. Let the words that have been spoken now fall away. They have served their purpose. They were not meant to be remembered, repeated, or analyzed. They were meant only to bring you to the threshold of awareness. Beyond that threshold, no teacher can go with you. Beyond that threshold, no book can accompany you. There, only God is. In this stillness, there is nothing to heal, nothing to change, nothing to achieve. There is only being, and being is complete. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. There is no interval in which something can go wrong. There is no gap in which evil can enter. There is no moment when God is absent. Rest here, not waiting for something to happen, but recognizing that it already is. If thoughts arise, let them pass. If fears whisper, let them dissolve. If conditions present themselves in memory or anticipation, let them be untouched. They do not require attention. They do not require response. Behold, I make all things new, not by changing them, but by revealing their true nature. This is the Sabbath, not a day, but a state, the Sabbath of consciousness, in which striving ceases and creation is seen as finished. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested. God did not rest because he was tired. He rested because there was nothing left to do, and that rest is your inheritance. Do not carry this message away with you as something to practice. Let it carry you. Let it live itself where you are. Let it meet life as it unfolds. You will not need to remember what was said. You will only need to remember what was felt, and even that will come naturally, without effort. If tomorrow brings joy, let it be joy. If tomorrow brings challenge, let it be challenge. Neither adds to you, neither subtracts from you. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Why? Because being is untouched by circumstance. Consciousness remains. So we leave this place, not to go somewhere else, but to remain where we are, in God, with God, as God expressed. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee, not as a future hope, but as a present fact. And now let us be still.